Hi, this is Larry Spiel. I want to introduce you to the class. I'll introduce myself first. I came here 11 years ago to Eastern Washington University. Before that, I taught at a place called Missouri Southern State University for 12 years. Before that, I got a PhD at the College of William and Mary. That's in Virginia, in Williamsburg, a very historic place that you should visit sometime if you can. Before that, I got a master's from Eastern Washington University and also met my wife there. So that's kind of a funny roundabout path in this world. Along with my wife, I have 2 children and this stupid cat who seems to want to be in the video. So there you go, Playful. There. Now beat it. Nobody likes you. We'll see if she stays gone. Where was I? Anyway, my specialties in history are the American West and American Indians. That's my original training. I wrote a book called Plateau Indians and the Quest for Spiritual Power, which is about how Indians of the Plateau region, that's the interior Northwest where we live, how they use their religion to understand white contact and how that religion changed as a result. If you have trouble sleeping, I'd recommend it. It will not be assigned in this class. A few years ago, I changed from being a traditional historian to doing what's called public history and digital history. Public history is teaching people to do all the things you can do with a historical degree that is not teaching. So, for example, people work in museums. That's the thing people do with history degrees. People work in archives, quite a few of them. People work in historic preservation, trying to save the old historic buildings and structures and things like that in our communities. That's a pretty active field. Historians work for the National Park Service, thousands of them. They're more often called interpreters than historians, but often if the park you're at is Gettysburg, for example, or Yorktown, you're doing historical work. So there's a lot of things people do with history degrees, and I train them to do that. That's more in my upper level classes. This, of course, is the survey. I live in Spokane, as I said, live with my wife. My 3 kids are grown and moved out of the house and also out of our bank account, so that's really sweet. Everything's going well. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the class. This is some fairly standard American history content in a lot of ways. It's a survey of the American past. What we mean by a survey is kind of the 50,000-foot view, like flying over the country. We won't get incredibly deep in any area, but we'll touch a lot of areas, and sometimes we will slow down to explore a little bit more. That's the way American history has been taught for generations. What's new is that we're learning this on the internet, and we're using some new resources along the way. For a long time, when people put a class online, they tried to make it just like the classroom class. Buy this book, read this book, highlight it with your yellow Sharpie, write some essays in a blue book when you come to campus, and so on. I don't do that. There's so many great resources for teaching American history online now for free that it would be irresponsible, I think, not to use them. So that's what I do. The main texts for this class, first is a free online textbook called American Yawp. American Yawp, as you'll see, that's a funny name. It's a quote from Walt Whitman. It's a really good introductory text. It's short, but it's interesting, and above all, it's free. There's a link to it free online, and you can use that. If you're a little bit clever, you can probably hook that up to one of these read out loud programs and turn it into an audiobook. If anybody does that, drop me an email. I'd love to hear it, and I'd love to share it with others. The lectures will not be me looking at my smartphone like I am right now. Again, I don't really see the point in that. Instead, we're going to be watching a series of lectures that WGBH in Boston produced a few years ago called A Biography of America. These are professionally produced. They have some of the best historians in the country. They have little clips of historic video once we move forward in time and things like that. They are much better than me showing you the PowerPoint I show in the classroom and talking into a microphone. I know a lot of people teach online that way. I don't see the point. So you won't actually see a lot of my face, which is, not a bad thing in this class. In addition to those, there's a lot of other kinds of resources I'm going to use. I listen to podcasts a lot, so I'll assign some podcasts. They're free, they're audio only. You can listen to them while you do the dishes or work out or whatever. I advise you get a podcast app on your smartphone and play around with that. But if you don't have a smartphone, that's just fine too. You can just click play and they'll play through the speakers of your computer or headphones or whatever you like. We'll have occasional videos from here and there. Increasingly, when prominent historians give a lecture in a public place, maybe that place will put that lecture onto YouTube, and that can be a great resource for us. So I'm really doing with this course is curating content more than creating content. I think you'll find it's much preferable to, again, to my narrated PowerPoints. Let's take a look at the syllabus. Here's a handy document, the syllabus to this class. You'll find this at the course website. Click on the home page, look on the left side where it says syllabus, click on that, and then click on the very top link. It'll take you to a Google Doc version of the syllabus, which you can print out and put under your pillow and so on. A quick walk through it. It talks about what the major objectives are of the course. I think those are pretty predictable. It talks about the required readings, and I've just described those. I often find myself, just from force of habit, I've been at this a long time, using the phrase readings when I mean the things you're supposed to read and view and listen to that week. You'll get used to it. At the bottom of the first page of the syllabus is the evaluation section. There'll be a quiz over the syllabus. I've almost got that done, and that'll be live, and that's worth 11 points. Those are 11 free points because you can take this quiz as many times as you like, and it's a quiz over the 4-page syllabus. You can't help but get 100 points if you do it once or twice. The reason I do that is I want you to know the rules in the syllabus. I don't want us 5 or 6 weeks in saying, I didn't know this or I didn't know that. So I'm bribing you with some free points to read the syllabus. The main assignment in this class, what will count for most of your grade, are the letters to a child assignment. Every week, you'll write a reaction paper to that week's readings and viewings and so on. I've struggled with how to keep you up in the readings. I find in an online class there needs to be some kind of weekly assessment or students fall behind and fail, and I hate seeing that. In the past, I did multiple choice quizzes. And when I say in the past, this was like in the early mid-1990s. I'm one of the early people to teach history online. And those quizzes worked back then. Nowadays, Google has gotten so much more powerful. There's so many more websites. There's so many cheating sites like Quizlets. Putting a multiple choice quiz online is just a contest in how fast you can Google things. And I think you probably experienced that kind of teaching. So I've had to give up on the weekly quizzes, and instead I have reaction papers. And I wanted to come up with a way to frame reaction paper that was a little less intimidating. So each week, I want you to think about what are the most important things you've learned about this period of history. And you'll write a letter. You'll say, Dear Susie, or whatever. And it'll be a letter to a child saying, Dear Susie, I've been studying American history. Here's what I think is important about this week. Or here's what I found really interesting about this week. And then just sort of lay it out there. You are not expected to regurgitate everything you learned in a 2 to 4 page letter. Honestly, from a grading point of view, I'm reading your letters and saying, did this person do all the readings and viewings and stuff like that, or did they skip over it? So what you do is you think about what's most important, and you find specific examples. And the time to do this is not when you sit down to write the letter, but when you're reading the textbook chapter, when you're watching the videos. If something sounds especially important to you, you go, oh yeah, that'll go good in my letter. Have open a Microsoft Word doc or a Google Doc or whatever, and take notes during the week. When you participate in the discussion board, same kind of thing. Look for things that can go in the letter. The letters are due every weekend, Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. I think I put in. Why don't you double check that on the website? So you'll write those. You write one each week. You write 10 of them. We'll drop your 2 lowest grades. Now your lowest grade could be 0. You might not do a letter 1 week, and that's fine. You might not do a letter 2 weeks, and that's fine. Every quarter, I have a student or two who decides, I'm just not going to write the first 2 letters, and that way those will be dropped and it'll be fine. I've never had that student pass the class. That's a bad philosophy. Write the first letter in particular. Get it in on time. You'll get some feedback. It sounds like an intimidating assignment to do this much writing in a 100 level class, but these will get pretty easy as the quarter goes on. You'll crank these suckers out, and your grade will improve consistently throughout. There's a discussion board every week, whether or not you write the letter that week. And again, I urge you to write the letter every week. But every week you'll participate in the discussion board. Some weeks I'll have some opening questions, sort of, what do you think this is? What do you think that is? But don't let me, it makes for a very, very boring discussion when the professor posts 5 questions and every student answers 3 of those questions with more or less the same answer, and they don't interact with each other. When I say it's the discussion board, what I want to see there is discussions. And the way to get discussions started is to post something that you find interesting. I am a really poor judge of what you people find interesting. There's a few years between us and a lot of different life experiences, but I'll guarantee you'll find something interesting every week. Go to the discussion board and talk about it. And don't wait till the end. A discussion cannot develop in the 6 hours at the end of the week before we move on to the next thing. You don't have to have read everything to discuss something. So begin early in the week. When you find something interesting, go start a topic in the discussion board. Pay a little bit of attention in the discussion board to the reply feature too. The one thing I'm not crazy about Canvas is it doesn't allow very well threaded replies. There's sort of 2 levels of threading, title, subtitle or whatever that you can do. So if you're starting a new discussion, open up that discussion board and right where I have the initial prompt, click reply there, and that'll start a new thread, so to speak, rather than going into somebody else's ongoing discussion saying, hey, some other thing I think is interesting. That won't get noticed as much. That won't be as likely to start a discussion. Anyway, we'll see you over there on the discussion board. It probably doesn't need saying, but be polite to each other. People treat each other terribly on the internet. I have a theory that a lot of what's wrong with our cultural wars right now has everything to do with the kind of style of argumentation people often use on the internet. Not in this class. If you disagree with someone, and a lot of what we're doing is not too controversial, but some really will be. We'll talk about things like the removal of Confederate monuments and so on, because that's history today. And if you disagree with somebody, talk to them not like a person on the internet. Talk to them like a friend of yours sitting across the table, having a beer or coffee with you or whatever. A friend of yours who's wrong, and correct them as you would a friend. Those are the two. Those are the 2 main things. There's the letters to a child, and there's the discussion board, and that's about it. What I like to do in this class, what I did back in the days of multiple choice assignments, was assign you a couple of very short research papers. I think with you writing 20 to 40 pages in a 100 level class, that's enough. It would not be reasonable in a 10-week period to assign longer essays. What else do we need to talk about? Late assignments. Sometimes you're going to be late. Sometimes I'm late with things. I don't want to tell you how overdue one of my book manuscripts is right now. It doesn't make you a bad person. I'm never judging you personally based on what you do in this class. If you're getting an F, you might be a perfectly good person. If you're getting an A, you might be a real pain in person. That's not my business. Don't be embarrassed if something is late. Just get it done when you can and turn it in. The penalty in this class is 1/3 letter grade per day that things are late, and that counts over the weekend too. So if your letter to a child, and that's really what we're talking about here, if your letter to a child is a day late, well, that's only 1/3 of a grade. That's not a big deal. If it's 3 days late, that's a whole letter grade. That's unfortunate, but you should still turn it in. If it's weeks and weeks late, maybe at that point you give up. Maybe that's one of the 2 zeros you take. You don't have to tell me, I'm going to be late this week or anything like that. It's automatic. You can turn in things late. They'll still count. They'll just count for a little bit less. And that is the late policy. Communicating with me. Let's use the discussion boards as much as we can. So that's both for discussing the content of the class, but it's also if you have a question about the class. In the first module, I created a discussion board, and it says, what does it say? Course Policies Discussion Board, I believe. So if you have a question about the class, if there's something I forgot to mention in the syllabus, and there's always something, ask it there. Because other people are wondering the same question. You ask the question there, I answer the question there, and it's answered for everyone. Instead of 40 emails going back and forth between you. On the other hand, sometimes you have something you don't want on the public discussion board, and that's fine too. Maybe it's just something personal. Maybe there's something going on in your life. Maybe you want to talk about your future. Maybe you want to major in history, and you should. Something like that, you want to communicate with me. Just go ahead and use the Canvas messaging system. It pops up right in my email, but it's also in the Canvas messaging box. I'm less likely to miss it that way. I get a lot of emails. I've got a lot of balls in the air. I'm doing a lot of things professionally. It's all fun, but it's easier for me to pay attention to you if you use the Canvas messaging system. On the other hand, if you want to call me, my phone number is on the syllabus. It'll leave a voicemail on my office phone. I'll get back to you eventually, I think. I'm not great at this. And if you want to come see me, my office hours are absolutely for you. My office hours are by appointment this quarter, but I'm pretty flexible. Go ahead and use that Canvas messaging system. Say, Professor, I'd like to have a meeting in the office. Throw out some times right away. Say, I'm available Thursday and Friday afternoons after 2. Do you have a time then? And then I'll probably respond simply by sending you a calendar invite directly. Office meetings are for all kinds of things. You might want to talk about the class and help figure things out. If you are not satisfied with the grades you've been getting on your letters, come on in and we'll go over them and figure out how we can make them better. If you want to talk about history just in general terms, but I'm there for that. If you want to talk about majoring in history and majoring in public history, having a future career in a museum or archive, again, I'd love to talk to you. So come on by. It's literally part of my job to be available to meet in the office with you, and I'd love to do it. You can also, I suppose, try and swing by the office. The trouble with that is I have a joint appointment. I should have said this at the beginning. I work half-time in the Washington State Archives. You might have noticed the building on the far side of Washington Street. Excuse me. And I am the assistant digital archivist for the state of Washington. So 20 hours a week I'm over there, or I'm doing that job by having meetings about digital archiving in Spokane or over in Olympia or somewhere like that. The other 20 hours a week I'm in the history department, or I'm grading papers for this class somewhere else because, if I'm in my office I get interrupted all the time or something like that. I'm also on the Spokane Historic Preservation Commission, so a couple times a month we're out going through historic buildings and seeing if they meet the criteria to be on the National Register and stuff like that. It's all a lot of fun, but I'm a moving target. You can swing by my office if I'm there, and if I have time I'll talk to you, but make an appointment. That's way, way better. There's one other thing I want to do this quarter, which is set up virtual office hours, a couple hours a week when I will just be hanging out in the Canvas video system. What's it called again? Zoom? I believe so. I'll just be have the Zoom video system on. If anybody wants to drop in, they can talk to me. I'll announce that by the end of the week, or maybe I'll put out some sort of poll because I really want to make this the best possible time for you. I've tried it in the past and students didn't generally check in, and that's fine. If you're passing the class without it, what do you need me for? But I do want to be available. Anything else to talk about? Let's talk about when you need help in this class. If you need help with the computer, I've got a PhD in history. I'm not the right person. If you need help with the computer, there's the EW Computer Help Desk. The people there are mostly pretty good. They're student workers. They're often computer science majors. They know things. The last time I called, the guy was eating a sandwich while I was talking to me. It was a little bit hard to understand him. Not always the best etiquette there. But they know things. If you're having a problem with your computer, you can also use, their email address. They'll get back to you. They know how to fix computers. Me, not so much. If you have a question about history or the class, that goes to me. You should also send it, by the way, to the teaching assistant, Alex Mikanek. I'll have Alex introduce himself a little bit later. Fascinating guy. He's studying American history, and particularly American Indian history here at the master's level at Eastern Washington University. Maybe I'll have him talk about his research a little bit in a video one week. We'll see if we can put that in. Two more things to mention, and this video is almost over. First, the scary part. Online learning is harder than in the classroom. And nobody thinks that. And it's absolutely true. If you look at what we call the DWF rates for online classes, people got a D or withdrew or got an F, they're higher and substantially higher for the classroom. I haven't kept track lately, but it's higher. More than that, students who take even one online class in their freshman or sophomore year are more likely not to finish college. And I'm not quite sure why that is. I have a lot of students who do really well in this class, and that's great. But it's not for everyone. You need a certain self-drive and motivation to succeed in the online classroom. If you're the kind of person who keeps a planner and gets everything done early and is a good self-starter, I guess is what I'm looking at more than anything. If you're a good self-starter, this is probably going to be a great class for you. If you tend to sit in the back of the class and just sort of skate along, maybe skip a lot of classes if the weather's nice, I've been that guy. No judgment here. I'm just saying if that's who you are, if you sit, kind of sit in the back and hope for your C, you're probably not going to pass. In my experience, A students get A's in online classes, C students often fail, and that's the truth. So think about it long and hard. I hate seeing people fail. And I hate seeing people spend a lot of money in college and not get credits. So think about that. I can't answer that question for you, but you probably can. Finally, disabilities and accommodations. Eastern Washington University, I'm going to read this out loud from the syllabus. Eastern Washington University is committed to providing support for students with disabilities. If you are a student with a physical, learning, emotional, or psychological disabilities needing an accommodation, you are encouraged to stop by the Disability Support Services office. That's in Tawanka 124. Tawanka 124. That's the building right next to it's the building that the